Hello, welcome to another reading vlog. So this vlog has taken me so long. I think I've been doing this for 9 months, this particular reading vlog, and I realised that I've lost, I don't know where I've saved the first clip where I talk about the first book. So that's really, really helpful, and so I'm going to come in now, I'm going to tell you about the first book. So this reading vlog is all about Naomi Booth. So I picked up 3 books from Naomi Booth at the library back in the summer. It is now February and I'm finally taking back the last one that I had. But the 3 books that I picked up were The Lost Art of Sinking, Sealed and Exit Management. So Naomi Booth is a lecturer at Durham University and she completed her PhD on literary swooning. And so her debut novella, The Lost Art of Sinking, is all about the art of the swoon. And it starts with some teenagers in a school who are trying to work out how to make themselves faint. And it's got that very peculiar, it's got a very peculiar aura about it. It is a fantastic book. It's one of those books where you read it and you think, this author is amazing. I don't think that particular book was the best. It wasn't the best it could be. It wasn't like a 5-star read for me. I gave it 4 stars in the end. But reading Naomi Booth's writing, I was like, this is an author I want to follow. This is an author I want more from. And so I was really glad to have 2 more books. The book is so full of just amazing imagery. Like the aesthetics of the writing is just fantastic. I really loved it. And I desperately need to own a copy of each of these books. So, I mean, that's a bit of a spoiler alert. I do end up loving every single one of these books, and she is most definitely a new favourite author. I really want to read her thesis. I really want to read her work about the art of the swoon in literature. Like, I just think that sounds like a fascinating thing to do research on. Now, it's just so annoying that I lost the footage, because obviously I read this now 7 months ago, 8 months ago, I don't even know. Oh, Holly. As is not the best book of this bunch. Here's me talking about Sealed. Okay, I finished book 2, guys. So this is Naomi Booth's debut novel. It is horror. It is a look at the way in which we're destroying the world. It is about a pandemic, which is unbelievable considering this was, I think she wrote it in like 2017 and it was published by Dead Ink in 2019. And so the way in which it talks about how pandemics are dealt with was unbelievable. But this is also a look at mental health. So the woman, the protagonist, is like obsessive about illness, and it's something that's only come on, say, later in her life, after seeing the effect of this particular pandemic on her mum when it was sort of still in its early days. And then when we're with them, it's absolutely like rampant. Although in this, the sort of governments are trying to hush it up, but it's so eerie and like kind of familiar, but very scary. And yeah, as I say, there's like this element of the environment and how wildfires are now like rampant across the world. So I think this is set in Australia. There is a lot of stuff that suggests it's Australia, although I don't know place names very well in Australia, so the place name could be completely imaginary and it's just sort of drawing on certain Australian themes, like terms like the prairie and stuff like that, which just don't, or the bush, which we don't use in the UK, even though I know Naomi Booth is a UK-based author. But yeah, this is a horror based on sort of body horror and making you feel really disgusting about what's going on in your own body. Like the way in which pregnancy is described is utterly disgusting. I'm glad I didn't read this whilst pregnant, but I loved this. I loved how dark it was. I loved the imagery that Naomi Booth used. If I'm going to read horror, this to me is scary. Like when we're afraid of what our own bodies are doing, when we're afraid of illnesses that we don't know how we catch them, and that to me is terrifying. One thing that was said in this that really, really got me was she mentioned how there was a time in her life, so the protagonist, I mean, mentions how when she's at a certain age and she feels like the world is getting bigger, and she loved it. She loved how the world was just expanding out in front of her. There was so much to see and so much to do. And then with this illness, it suddenly felt like everything was drawing in. And that is exactly how I felt through the COVID pandemics. So initially, I live far enough out in the countryside that whilst obviously we were very worried about it. It didn't necessarily feel overly worrying. And then I think we got to about the 3rd lockdown and it was rampant around where I am as well. How many times can I say rampant in one video? And that's when it felt claustrophobic, like it felt like everything was like closing in on me. And that's how this book makes you feel. Really good. And you can see like the step up from her first novel. So her first novella, sorry, was really good. But it felt like a first novel, whereas this one, oh God, it's terrifying and so good. Yeah, so let's hope the next one continues this amazing streak. It's been a long time coming, but I have finally read the 3rd book that I had from Naomi Booth, which is Exit Management. Shiny cover from the library. I think I was putting it off because Naomi Booth's last 2 books that I read were so good that I was kind of like, what if this one doesn't live up? So I just kept like putting it off. I'd like hyped it up to myself because I enjoyed the first 2 so much. Now, I really don't know how to rate this book. I think Sealed is the best of the 3. I'm going to put it out there. I think Sealed is the best. It was the one that I think worked the best as a story in itself. It was the one that had me the most gripped, although this really did grip me. I read this in a couple of days. We've just been away. We've just been away to Brighton and I literally devoured this over those 2 days that we were away. This one hones in more on the characters and the themes, and what I really loved about this is that, especially, I mean, we have sort of 2 perspectives. We have Callum and we have, do you know what, I don't even know what her name is. Lauren. So we have Callum and we have Lauren. Lauren feels the most well-rounded of the characters. And then we have like this 3rd character whose perspective we never actually hear from, which is Joseph, who escaped Hungary after the war. And so he has a lot of history, he has a lot of stories that Callum gets to know him and becomes his carer in the end. And Joseph is a very rich art dealer and Callum ends up inheriting all of Joseph's fortune. And he doesn't know how to deal with this because that's not what he was expecting. He just really loved Callum. He just really loved Joseph. And Lauren becomes Callum's girlfriend and almost fixates on this wealth, on the house that they live in. But it's more nuanced than that. She's not a gold digger. It's so much more nuanced than that. And I found it really fascinating the way that Naomi Booth has crafted these characters, the way that there is so much like duality to their characters, how they can be feeling one thing but also almost the entirely opposite thing at the same time. Like, it was just magnificently done, that aspect. As I say though, it just wasn't quite as together as Sealed. So I think I would give this a 4 stars. It's going to live in my mind. I need to own a copy because when I think about the sort of writing that I would like to do, and yes, I mean, I think most readers think about whether they would like to write something in the future. This is a book that I would be heavily inspired by. The way that there is that hybridity in each of the people's characters is just phenomenal. Now, I don't know whether this one speaks to me because I used to work in London and it's about trying to cast off sort of working class life and pretending that you fit in London culture. And now, whilst I didn't grow up in a working class background, I will say that way in which working in London can alter your perspective on life is something that I have experienced. And so I do wonder whether I feel a bit more of an affinity with this book because I've kind of been there. I've kind of experienced that weird way that these high intensity offices can almost change you and change how you look at the world, but how the world always comes back. Like, there is still all of your history, there is still all of who you really are that rears its head again even when you're trying to be a different person. So yeah, I think I've just been so massively incoherent, but yeah, this was really good. So I think if I were to put it in an order, I mean, it's not really much of an order. Sealed, top, loved that. Exit Management and The Lost Art of Sinking, I think I would put together. However, I think the characters in Exit Management and some of the themes in Exit Management would put it slightly above The Lost Art of Sinking, but I'm still giving The Lost Art of Sinking 4 stars. So maybe Lost Art of Sinking 4 stars, 4.5 stars, and then Sealed 5 stars, I think. Yeah, so I now just need to read her short story collection, and and she has some non-fiction that's published online, like an essay about literary swooning, which I would quite like to read, but I'll save that for another time and get this video up and online.